Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Allison Spicer. I'm with the employment team here at Nefesh B'Nefesh. This workshop is focusing on people who are less than 6 months away from making Aliyah. We're getting ready for your job search in Israel. If you are more than 6 months away from making Aliyah, or you're already here in Israel, you're obviously welcome to watch this workshop as well. But we are focusing on that time frame of what you should be doing when you are within 6 months of making Aliyah. My email address is employment@nbn.org.il. I'm going to try to answer lots of your questions during this workshop, but if I don't answer your question or you want to discuss your specific situation, please go ahead and reach out to me. All right, let's get started. What are we going to talk about today? First and foremost, we're going to focus on resumes. I think that's pretty obvious why that's important to touch upon, to look at. What does a resume in Israel look like? We're going to explore networking and talk about how you can get started networking in networking before you're in Israel. We're going to separate a little bit the idea of a job from career. And we're going to talk about a timeline. What does your job search timeline look like when you're making Aliyah? All right, so what is the goal of a resume? It's a question I like to ask people because most often the answer to this question that I hear is obviously the goal of a resume is to get a job, but that's not true. You want a job and you need a resume, but the goal of a resume is to get a phone call. The goal of a resume is to get an email back. The goal of a resume is to get an interview scheduled. It's an important nuance. It's an important difference, and it's something to keep in mind when you're working on your resume, when you're writing your resume, when you're editing your resume. Don't focus on, I need a job, I need a job. Focus on, I need to convince the employer that I'm a relevant candidate. That's it. I need to focus on how I can get them to call me. I want to figure out how to present myself in a resume so that they'll look at me and say, yeah, I want to continue the conversation with this person. But don't feel pressure to put everything you've ever done in your entire life in this document. Don't feel pressure to put every anecdote and every accomplishment in this document. You just want a phone call, you want an email, you want an interview schedule. That's it. In order to get to that point, we want to have a clean, concise, and relevant resume. In Israel, we are really talking about a one-page resume. And I know that's hard for a lot of you, even if you have 25, 30 years of experience. I really, really, really cannot encourage you enough to try for that one-page resume, but it should still be relevant. It should still be readable, good mix of white space. It should be clear, should be brief. It shouldn't be in 8-point font condensed like this big block of words. It should be really, really easy to read. Now, if you can't do a one-page resume, you can send in a very well edited 2-page resume. But from my experience talking to HR directors, they will very often kind of scratch their head and say, why didn't this person send a 1-page resume? A 2-page resume is probably not going to be a make it or break it factor in you getting a job. But it's important for you to know that the expected format for a resume here in Israel really is 1 page, even if you are at a pretty senior level. Exceptions to the rule would be anybody really in medicine, any field within the medical field, or academia. You're applying to be a professor somewhere. You can have more than 1 page. You're a nurse, you're a doctor, you're a physical therapist, you can go ahead and have more than one page. That's fine. If your resume is ready to go, according to everything that we've discussed, it is clean, it's concise, it's readable, it's relevant, it's updated, meaning focusing on the last 10 to 15 years. If your resume is ready to go, you can send it to resumes@nbn.org.il. Sometimes we are able to pass along resumes for relevant positions. If your resume needs work, you're welcome to send it to employment@nbn.org.il. And just to give you an idea, even if I say one page, it doesn't mean you need to go towards boring. Okay, you can play around with the formatting, can add a little color, a little bit of graphics. Don't go crazy. Okay, don't add too much bold, too much color, too much highlighting, too many graphics, because again, you want it to be so easy for the employer, for the person reading your resume, to figure out at a glance who you are, what are your skills, why are you applying for this job, and why they should call you. If they have to search to find that information, you're going to get a pass. If they have to search to find your contact information, you're going to get a pass. I'd say on average, somebody's going to look at your resume for about 8 seconds. Something else to keep in mind. Somebody's going to look at your resume for 8 seconds. You're going to work on it for hours, and you have a couple of seconds to present this information to somebody. And it needs to be really, really easy to read. Bite-size points, bullet points are great. Put your skills, put really everything important towards the top, because somebody will spend a little bit more time on the top of the resume. And again, try to remember that you're just trying to get the employer's attention. You want them to look at you as a relevant candidate. All right, that's resume. A good thing to do when you're starting to work on your job search is to start with a resume, because once you jump into networking and once you jump into looking at job boards, it's very easy to get to a point where somebody wants your resume. So I would really recommend that this be the first thing that you work on. But let's move on to networking. The biggest secret of networking is to start building your network before you need it, before you need to reach out to somebody and say, hey, I'm actually looking for a job. So let's look at somebody who's 6 months away from making Aliyah, and you're in marketing. Okay, so you're going to only want to apply for jobs when you're 1 to 2 months prior to your target work start date. And we'll get to that a little bit later in the workshop when we come back to timelines. But somebody who is 6 months away from making Aliyah is not yet applying for the job. But what that person should be doing is building their network. Now, networking really means establishing connections, and it is in your best interest to establish connections with many, many, many people in different fields. So if you're in marketing, you should be in contact with people who are not in marketing, who are in adjacent fields, other fields, unrelated fields, because when you are up to job searching, obviously your natural connections of people who could keep their ear out and let you know if they hear about something are in marketing, but also somebody in graphic design or somebody in sales or even research and development. They might have colleagues who are in marketing, or there might be a marketing opening at their company. So this is a really good time to establish connections. And I'd say that in this day and age with Corona, and honestly, if you're still in the United States, Canada, England, anywhere, LinkedIn is great. LinkedIn is a wonderful, wonderful tool, and it's actually really big in Israel. For those of you who already have a LinkedIn account, wonderful. I would encourage you to ask yourself, are you on LinkedIn or are you using LinkedIn. And for those of you who do not have a LinkedIn account, that is your homework. Go ahead, it's free. Open a LinkedIn account. It's pretty self-explanatory, but there are good tutorials on YouTube as well. What does it mean to be on LinkedIn or using LinkedIn? I'd say that if you're on LinkedIn, you've opened a LinkedIn account, you've filled out the basic information about yourself, about your work history. Maybe you've joined a couple of groups, but that's it. If you're using LinkedIn, you're following some people, you're following some companies, you are posting, you are sharing articles of interest. And more than anything else, LinkedIn is a phenomenal tool for networking. And here's what I want to show you. Now, let's come back to the marketing director example. I would type that in to the search bar at the top. Now, a lot of you may have used LinkedIn to search for jobs, and I'm going to encourage you to put that on hold. And I changed jobs to people. You see where it's circled in yellow, it says people. So we're looking for people who are currently or were previously a marketing director, and I'm changing my location, if it isn't already, set to Israel. Now, I did this from my account, and I came up with 35,000 results looking for marketing director people in Israel. Now, there are two ways to reach out to people. I can click the connect button, which brings up another window, offers me to just connect or send a message. And I'll encourage you to send a message, and it can be really generic, and you don't even need to write the person's name. That way you can just copy and paste. Hi, my name is Allison. I'm in marketing and I'm making Aliyah in a couple of months, and I wanted to reach out to you and pick your brain. And this is an opportunity to ask 2 or 3 really good questions. What skills are really in demand? What websites are you reading? What podcasts are you listening to? Are there online conferences I should know about? Where do people usually find out about jobs, etc.? Ask 2 or 3 questions. Don't say, hi, I'm Allison. I'm making Aliyah in 6 months. I'm looking for a job. That's not a really good point to start with, because you want to build a network. So asking somebody for advice is always a really good place to start, and send that message after you click connect, you open that window, you type in your message, or better yet, you copy and paste it, and you send that. You make time to send like 50 of those. Send out 50, the equivalent of a cold call, if you will, 50 networking connection requests, and you'll probably get 5, 6, 7 back. Now, on the one hand, that's not an amazing percentage, but why is that? People are busy. Some people are on LinkedIn and not using LinkedIn. Some people just don't have time or won't see your message, but you'll get 5, 6, 7 people writing back to you. And now you have 5, 6, 7 connections who can help you later on. And my favorite networking question is always, who else should I be speaking with? Who else can you connect me to? Because my theory is one person can always connect you to another 2 or 3, and then those to another 2 or 3, and that's how you grow your network. I just wanted to show you one more way, a little bit more time consuming, although it's a better way to do it, is under the person's name I circled in light blue are shared connections. So the more effective way to reach out to somebody is to reach out to one of your shared connections and say, hi, I see that you're connected to so-and-so. Can you make an introduction? Now, that's a wonderful thing to do if you're not working, if you have lots of time, if you don't need to pack, if you really are taking your time with this and have a lot of time to dedicate. That is the better way to do it. It's extremely time consuming, so most people really do go with the first way. All right, that's networking. Once you've established your network, you later can circle back to the people you've connected with and say, hey, thanks so much for being in touch with me over the last couple of months. I'm now starting my job search. This is what I'm looking for, and this is also what I'm open to. So please keep your ear out. And at that point, they may say, okay, great, can you send me your resume? which you've already worked on. All right, let's take a minute to talk about the difference between job and career. Let's follow the example of the marketing director. Now, let's say you move to Israel and you're having trouble finding a job in your field, or you're not ready to find a job in your field because you're doing Ulpan, you're learning Hebrew a couple of hours a day, and you don't have time in your schedule to get a full-time job. So maybe you go work at a bookstore. A bookstore is a very fine place to work at. It's a perfectly wonderful job, but it's not in your career path. Now, I really encourage all of you to give yourselves that space, especially at, your first year or two in Israel, to take a job that may not be exactly what you're looking for. It may not be exactly in your career path. It may not be even related to your career path. But for financial reasons, and honestly, social reasons, adjustment reasons, it's a really good idea to get a job within your first year or two of moving to Israel, even if you have other plans for your career. So give yourself that space. I was once working with an Ole who was around 50 years old. He was in computers and he was having trouble finding a job in computers, but he wanted a job. And he took a job at a factory. And I caught up with him a few months later and I said, "How's it going?" And he answered, "Listen, it's a very boring job, but I love the people I'm working with. I'm learning how, corporate Israel works. I'm learning how to read my pay stub. I enjoy having lunch with my colleagues and telling jokes and working on my Hebrew. And the way I look at it, they're paying me to work on my Hebrew." And he said, "Listen, I don't intend to be here for the long term, but for right now, I'm really happy." And in fact, about a year later, he got a job in computers, but it was a really good bridge for him. So I'm not pushing anybody to work in something that they're uncomfortable working in. And at the same time, keep your options open, especially at the beginning. All right. Do you have all your ducks in a row? Do you know what the job market looks like right now? This is where doing your research is really important. If you are, for example, in a medical field, have you figured out how to transfer your medical license, your nursing credentials? Are you a social worker? Have you figured out how to deal with the paperwork? There's paperwork. There's more paperwork. There's bureaucracy. But it's important. And I actually think that it's easier to deal with it now while you're making Aliyah, while you're dealing with Aliyah paperwork and Aliyah bureaucracy, instead of dealing with it a few years down the line. Even if you're not planning to work as a social worker for a couple of years, deal with everything now. It is just easier. Okay. And before you start applying for jobs, you should have an idea of what does the job market look like right now in general, and specifically in your field. Does your field exist in Israel? What does the day-to-day life of somebody who's an appliance repairman or repair person look like in Israel compared to where you are? Does working as a teacher look the same compared to what you're used to looking at what it is in Israel? And a great way to explore your profession is to take a look at our professions index online. It's on the Nefesh B'Nefesh website, and we have so many fields represented here. And you'll find information in terms of licensing or transferring your credentials. If that's relevant, you'll find information about best ways to find a job in that field. You'll very often find an interview or two with somebody who works in the field. So that's worth looking into. Don't make any assumptions. Come in with a good understanding of what does your field look like in Israel, and what does the market for that look like right now. All right, we've come to timeline. Timeline is really important because you should not be comparing your timeline for your job search in Israel to anybody else's, because your timeline for doing other things may look different. Are you fluent in Hebrew and therefore you're not doing Ulpan, and maybe you are looking to start working from day one? Are you looking to get your family settled? Maybe you're moving right before the Jewish holidays and everything kind of shuts down. So you say, all right, I'm not even going to look for a job until afterwards. Maybe you want to drop your stuff and go tour the country for a couple of months and then get a job. Maybe you need a job right away and you're doing Ulpan. So try to figure out for yourself, okay, I'm making Aliyah January 7th. What happens January 8th? I'm making Aliyah August 1st. When am I going to start looking for a job? It also has a lot to do with your financial situation. Maybe you have that cushion to say, listen, I'm going to look for the job that I want for like 8 months. And then if I don't find the job that I want, I'm going to have to take the job that I need. But that 8 months cushion for you might be 3 months or 3 years for somebody else. All right. So try to figure out for yourself, what is your timeline going to look like? When do you plan on looking for a job, or when do you hope to have a job? And then you work backwards. Send in your job applications and let people in your network know that you're looking for a job 1 to 2 months prior to that target work start date. Whenever you would want to start working, work backwards 1 to 2 months. If you're in the medical field, if you're a doctor or a nurse, you could do a couple of more months, a couple of months before that even, like towards 3, 4, 5 months. But really most everybody else is 1 to 2 months prior to your target work start date is the earliest you should send in actual job applications. Okay. If you're sending in job applications, you're applying for jobs that are posted and no one is getting back to you. So first of all, don't get discouraged, but try to figure out why that is. Is it because it's been 2 weeks and you're a little impatient? Is it because you're applying for the wrong types of jobs? Are you not applying for jobs where you're going to be a good match? Are you not applying for enough jobs? You know, I can't tell you how many times I have this conversation with somebody who says, no one's getting back to me. And I ask, how many jobs have you applied for this week? And they say 2. If you're doing a job search, you need to really be pushing. You need to be looking for jobs to apply for, networking heavily, and sending in lots of job applications. So make sure you're sending in enough resumes. And then is your resume working for you? If enough time goes by and you really aren't getting any calls, any emails, try to figure out if your resume needs some rework. And also maybe you need 2 resumes. Let's say you're open to working in nonprofit management or in marketing. So you may want to actually have 2 different resumes. If you come from a background working as a lawyer, but you're also open to working in nonprofits, you may want to have more of a lawyer resume, more of a lawyer focused resume, and more of a nonprofit manager focused resume. So maybe you need to have different resumes. And the other thing is, it used to be common for people to send a note and say, thank you so much for applying for this job, but you're not a relevant candidate. People will just ignore you. So it's not that they're not receiving your resume. Don't feel, oh my gosh, do I need to call them and everything? People will just ignore irrelevant job applications. What if I don't find the job that I want? We mentioned this a little bit earlier. Coming to Israel is a change, and the goal is to have a successful aliyah. And I would encourage you to keep an open mind in terms of what type of job title you have, or what type of a company that you end up applying for compared to what you have in mind. And also remember, getting that first job in your career path in Israel is a real challenge. And it doesn't mean that you're going to stay in that job for the rest of your life, it means you got a job, and wonderful, and congratulations. And you can stay there for a couple of years and then move on. But the narrower your focus is, I need to have exactly this job title with exactly this salary, and it has to be a job only in English, and it has to be a job within walking distance from my house. The more narrow you make your focus of what you're open to, the more frustrated you're going to be. The people who I see who are the most successful at finding a job that they feel good about, they are proactive and they are open-minded. So something to think about. All right, where do you find a job? I think this is pretty similar to any other place. There are job boards, which we're going to look at in just a moment. We've talked about networking, and networking is also informal. Friends, family, going to a coffee shop, talking to people. Facebook. Now, I mean a couple of things by this. Facebook, you can post on Facebook, guys, I'm looking for a job, or just putting a shout out to everybody. I am looking for a job, or I'm getting ready to make Aliyah and I'm going to be looking for a job. Here are 3, 4 of my, most important skills that I want to highlight. And if you hear of something, sent it my way. That's one thing about Facebook. The other thing is there are Facebook groups that are very focused either in a specific geographic area of Israel or a specific field. Like there's a Facebook group called Olim in Tech, or there are jobs for Olim in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. Seek out Facebook groups. It's become a really good tool for job searching in Israel. And don't get scared if you see all the job posts are in Hebrew. Use Google Translate for a while. Try to figure out how to say your job title in Hebrew so that you can keep an eye out for something like that. Job fairs and networking events, I put them together. They're really 2 different things. Job fairs are worth attending. Most people do not get a job out of a job fair, but it is the networking that's always the critical point. Talking to people, establishing connections. With Corona still on our minds, these kind of things are slowly coming back. But I do see online events, or I do see job fairs or networking events in person slowly starting to come back. It's something worth looking into. It's something worth keeping your eye out for. LinkedIn posts. We talked about using LinkedIn for networking. LinkedIn is also a job search tool. If instead of people you're looking for jobs, you can use it and apply for jobs directly from LinkedIn. But I have to say that lately I've seen people make a post. And if you're not familiar with that, it's just like Facebook, you create a post and people can comment. I've seen people create a LinkedIn post describing very briefly what they're looking for and describing briefly their major skill set and experience, and do really well with that. Or also ask in the post publicly, because it'll come up in other people's feed, a question, I'm looking for this, who should I be speaking to? Or I'm looking to connect to physical therapists who recently made Aliyah. Who should I be speaking with? All right. Job boards is really, really important for 2 reasons. One, for the obvious, you can apply for jobs on a job board. But even before you're ready to apply for jobs, it's a great tool to see what's out there. If you take 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a week before you're ready to apply for a job, just to see what's out there, as if you were going to apply for something today, what's out there that's relevant for you? Where are the jobs? What is your commute going to need to look at? Are all the jobs that are relevant for you in Haifa, and you're probably going to be living in Jerusalem? It's important information for you to figure out. Are your jobs all over the country and plentiful? Then you're in a really good situation. If you are watching the job boards for 3 months and you only see 3 things that are relevant for you to apply for, that's a really good signal that you're going to want to expand your horizons and be a little bit more open-minded in terms of what you're going to apply for. So use the job boards as a research tool even before you're up to applying for jobs. I just want to go through a couple of job boards. There are many, 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 many job boards out there relevant for Israel. I encourage you to try to find 2, 3, maybe 4 job boards that are most relevant for you, but are also different one from the other so that you're covering a wide base. Nefesh B'Nefesh has its own job board. It's a really good place to start. We try to filter and post jobs that are likely to be relevant for English-speaking Olim, and you apply directly to the company through the job board. So again, this is a really good place to start. Drushim. Drushim is a Hebrew job board in Israel, but if you're using Google Chrome, first of all, work on your Hebrew, okay? Work on your Hebrew as much as possible if that's something that is a gap for you. If you're using Google Chrome, you can usually right-click and it'll give you the option to translate the page into English. Better yet, leave the page in Hebrew, and in the search box, you can put in terms in English and it will understand what you're saying. If you write Java programmer, if you write content writer, physical therapist, you can go ahead and use English search terms and it will spit back to you relevant job openings according to your search. I love Drushim because it's very, very, very vast. It is super frequently updated, and it just it has a lot of opportunities there. I would encourage you to learn some basic words like merkaz if you're going to be in the center of the country, shivuk if you're in marketing. Try to learn some keywords that are going to help you in Hebrew for your specific job search. All right, Glassdoor. Glassdoor in Israel is pretty much focused on business, what we call white collar jobs. However, you saw from the snapshot that I have here, also have radiologist, flexible work from home opportunity, web search evaluator. Glassdoor is nice because sometimes the company actually has a rating where people who have worked at the company can rate how much they like that company as an employer. And Glassdoor tends to be in English. The job postings tend to be in English, although you'll find a mix all over. Even Drushim, which is in Hebrew, sometimes you'll find English job postings. So Glassdoor is also one that I would encourage you to use if that's something that's relevant for you. Just like there are field-specific Facebook groups, there are sometimes field-specific job boards. This is also something that you could add as a networking question. Are there field-specific job boards that I should be looking at? Here's one. This is called Shatil. And this is great for what in Israel is called the third sector, nonprofit jobs. Now, when I first opened this website, I immediately saw where it says English, and I went to go click on it. Don't do that, because it just brings you to a donor-facing site. It is not the job search site in English. So you're going to use the Hebrew job board for Shatil if you're in nonprofit. And again, you can search by area, you can search by type of job. And again, if you're in Google Chrome, you should be able to navigate this in English. I'm bringing this as an example because, while Shatil is focused on nonprofit, third sector jobs, there are other field-specific job boards out there. Do not drive yourself crazy. Do not be looking at 30 job boards, because I think that it is important not to put all your eggs in one basket. Job boards are really important. People get jobs through applying on job boards, but you really need to diversify. You need to be networking. You need to be making connections. You need to be using LinkedIn and not just, focusing on 20 job boards. So I suggest find 2, 3, 4 job boards that you feel really speak to you, where you see opportunities that make sense for you, and use those. All right, I think we covered a lot. We looked at resumes, we looked at networking, we looked a little bit at the difference between job and career, and we talked about timeline and using the job boards. I encourage you to reach out to me at employment@nbn.org.il, and good luck with everything. See you in Israel.